Friends, recently I watched a film called The Bride, and it's an American Gothic horror movie. This film is directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it is inspired by the 1935 film Bride of Frankenstein. So in today's video, we'll go through the story of The Bride and also talk about its ending. Before we begin, I have a small request for all of you. If you enjoy this video, please make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel as well. So now, with that said, let's roll the intro. At the beginning of the movie, we see Mary Shelley, who is shown to be in her afterlife. For those of you who don't know about Mary Shelley, let me quickly explain that she was an English writer who is best known for her novel Frankenstein. She wrote this story at a very young age, and it eventually became a classic in both science fiction and horror. In the afterlife, we see a monologue from Mary where she says that she has been stuck there for a very long time. She did write the story of Frankenstein, but she wasn't able to finish her own story as she couldn't survive in 1851 due to a brain tumor. However, now she notices a crack, something that might allow her to complete her unfinished story. You might ask how? Well, it's the year 1936, and in Chicago there is a girl named Ida whom she plans to possess. From here, the scene shifts to Ida, who is at a restaurant, and everyone around her belongs to the mob. We all know that during the 1930s, America was heavily influenced by mob bosses, and Ida is a girl who is under their control. This means she has to follow their orders in everything, from sitting and standing to even being intimate and more. At first, Ida seems completely normal, but suddenly she gets possessed by Mary Shelley, and she climbs onto a table and starts speaking strangely in an English accent. She begins exposing the crimes of the mob members present there, and she even starts revealing the crimes of the mob boss Lupino himself. All of this is happening because she is being controlled by Mary. Lupino is standing near the bar counter, from where he signals his men to take care of Ida. Immediately, two of his men, Clyde and James, grab Ida and take her outside, where she is still speaking in a strange manner. James even slaps her, and during all this, it feels as if Clyde has some sympathy for Ida. However, in the very next moment, Clyde pushes her down the stairs, and due to the injuries from that fall, Ida couldn't survive. From here, the scene moves to Chicago, where a man arrives at the residence of a scientist named Dr. Cornelia Euphronius. We come to understand that this man is the Frankenstein monster, and he has come to Dr. Cornelia because he wants a partner. Yes, the Frankenstein monster was created in 1819, and from that time until 1936 he has been completely alone, which is why he is now seeking companionship. He has already read Dr. Cornelia's books, where she has written about reanimating those who are no longer alive, and because of this, he believes that she can create an undead partner for him. In this entire sequence, there is also a strong element of feminism, which continues to appear throughout the film. For example, when Frankenstein came to meet Dr. Cornelia, he had no idea what she looked like, so he assumed that the scientist would be a man. However, to his surprise, Dr. Cornelia is actually a woman. She examines him and studies him carefully, but she is not convinced about reanimating a deceased woman. Frankenstein ends up staying at her place, and that night we see him watching a movie featuring an actor named Ronnie Reed. He is such a huge fan of Ronnie that he watches his films repeatedly, not just once but countless times. He even imagines himself dancing in place of Ronnie in those films. Anyway, the next morning another argument takes place between Frankenstein and Dr. Cornelia, where Frankenstein mentions that Dr. Cornelia is the first human who ever shook hands with him, and this made Frankenstein feel very good. Hearing this, Dr. Cornelia feels pity for him and agrees to help Frankenstein. So that night, both of them dig in a nearby graveyard and bring back the remains of a random woman, and this lady was none other than Ida. When Frankenstein sees Ida, he finds her very beautiful, and because of this, Frankenstein felt that they shouldn't bring this beautiful lady back to life because she is too beautiful for him. But Dr. Cornelia says that she will either do this work today or never. So yes, Frankenstein had no other option, and in this situation, Dr. Cornelia connects her machines and equipment to Ida's body and then begins her experiment. At one point, the electricity shorts out and sparks fly everywhere, after which we see Ida come back to life. Yes, friends, Ida had come back to life, but she didn't remember at all who she was. She suddenly vomits, and a crystalloid solution comes out of her mouth, which is a solution that was put into Ida's body for this experiment. The stains from this solution remain permanently on Ida's body and face. Now, when Ida's journey had ended after falling from the stairs, one of her legs had also broken, which is why she is currently unable to walk. Dr. Cornelia convinces Ida to let her tend to her wounds, and friends, here Ida doesn't even remember her own name. Dr. Cornelia and Frank tell Ida that she is Frankenstein's bride and that her memory is gone due to an accident. Ida accepts this, and Dr. Cornelia tells Ida to spend the night there. That night, out of happiness, Frankenstein watches the same Ronnie movie again, where he once again imagines himself dancing. Now, the next morning when Ida wakes up, she finds Frankenstein sleeping under her table. Ida blows on him, and Frankenstein suddenly attacks Ida because his natural reaction was one of self-defense. But immediately, Frankenstein apologizes to Ida, and just then Dr. Cornelia enters the room. She invites Ida and Frankenstein to breakfast, where she says that today she will run some tests on Ida. But friends, Ida wanted to be free, and she starts breaking cups and things to resist Dr. Cornelia's instructions. Because of this, Dr. Cornelia locks Ida and Frankenstein back in the room, but they both escape from the balcony. So their adventure is about to start from here, but before telling you that, let me give you two details. First, Dr. Cornelia had an assistant cum maid named Greta, and the second detail is that Mary would repeatedly possess Ida, causing Ida to suddenly start saying strange things in a British accent. By strange, I mean things that Mary wants to say, and it mostly involves the suffering of women. Anyway, first of all, Frankenstein and Ida go to a theater to watch Ronnie's movie, and Frankenstein tells Ida how Ronnie is his favorite actor. Ronnie had polio as a child, and doctors said that he would never even be able to walk. But Ronnie not only recovered, but he is now one of the best dancers. One of Ronnie's legs is shorter, but he wears special shoes so that his balance stays perfectly fine. Hearing this story, we viewers can clearly understand why Frankenstein liked Ronnie so much, because just like him, Ronnie wasn't normal either, but today the world has accepted him. In fact, he is one of the most loved stars. Frankenstein sees himself in Ronnie, hoping that one day the world will accept him in a similar way. Now, after the movie, both go to a party in a shady area where Ida starts dancing. Frankenstein imagines himself dancing with Ida, and Ida even gets her makeup done by some ladies there. Then suddenly some creepy guys surround Ida right on the dance floor and touch her inappropriately. In this situation, Ida and Frankenstein leave the party, but friends, those people come outside while following Ida. These people attack Frankenstein, then move forward to mistreat Ida. But then Frankenstein attacks these two men and finishes them off right there. Before Frankenstein and Ida could run away from here, a random guy standing nearby takes a few photos of them. After this, Frankenstein runs away with Ida, and they both reach a building. Frankenstein climbs the building and retrieves his belongings from inside an apartment, along with a newspaper clipping featuring Ronnie's picture and some news. Frankenstein tells Ida to go far away from him, otherwise she will also get in trouble. But friends, Ida doesn't leave Frankenstein because she didn't even know who she was or where she lived, so Frankenstein takes Ida along with him as he escapes. After this, friends, we are shown a strange scene where Ida's head is trapped inside a glass jar, and Mary is asking her if she is going to marry Frankenstein. Ida is suffocating, and Mary tells her to find your name. This was of course Ida's vision, because in reality Ida and Frankenstein had escaped and hidden inside a cargo train. The police are unable to find them, but suddenly Ida gets possessed by Mary and starts screaming, which helps a police officer locate them. By then, the cargo train had started moving, and when the officer sees Frankenstein's scary face, he moves forward to use his pistol. But before he could fire, Ida pushes him, causing him to fall off the train, and he couldn't survive. Anyway, in the next scene, we see Detective Jake Wiles and his assistant Myrna Malloy, who are going to work on the case involving Frankenstein and Ida. From their conversation, we can understand that Myrna is much better than Jake at detective work, but she is still just an assistant because the society is patriarchal, where people believe that women cannot be detectives. Myrna and Jake investigate the crime scene where Frankenstein had finished off two men, and there they get photos of Frankenstein and Ida from a guy. Remember, a guy had taken their pictures. After this, both detectives go to the train tracks where a police officer was no longer with us, and the officers present there also treat Myrna as if to ask what a lady is doing at a crime scene. Anyway, Myrna finds a paper cutting here with Ronnie's photo, and friends, this is the same paper cutting that belonged to Frankenstein. I mean, it must have fallen during the struggle. From this, Myrna guesses that Frankenstein is a fan of Ronnie because a theater owner in Chicago had given a statement saying he saw a guy like Frankenstein who comes to the theater every day to watch the same Ronnie film. film. Also, these detectives found out that Frankenstein would be in New York because that's where the train was headed. So yes, now Jake and Myrna will go to New York to catch Frankenstein. On the other hand, Frankenstein and Ida had reached New York, where Frankenstein first collects coins thrown into a wishing fountain. Then both of them go and stay at an abandoned place. Their photos had appeared in the newspaper stating that Frankenstein and his bride are wanted. Here, Ida asks Frankenstein what her name is, and Frankenstein first says Ginger, then says, "No, your name is not Ginger, I was just joking. Your real name is Penelope Rogers." Actually, Ida likes both of these names. At this point, Ida tries to get intimate with Frankenstein, but Frankenstein refuses. However, we viewers notice that even though the world sees Frankenstein as a dangerous monster, in reality he lives in a lot of pain and even has nerve problems. Now that night, Frankenstein starts taking Ida to watch Ronnie's film in New York again. By then, Jake and Myrna had also reached that theater because they knew Frankenstein would come to see Ronnie's movie. At the last moment, Ida pulls Frankenstein to watch a different film because she didn't want to watch Ronnie's movie over and over again. So yes, Frankenstein and Ida start watching a film called Revolt of the Zombies, where a man and a woman in the hall were getting physical with each other. The woman was saying no in excitement, and Ida thinks that the man is mistreating her, which is why she starts shouting at the guy. Just then, the man sees that this is Frankenstein and his bride, and he starts screaming. This creates chaos in the hall, and Frankenstein and Ida run away from there. By now, the noise had reached the detectives as well, and they also run toward the crowd. While running, Frankenstein and Ida enter a building where a high-class party was going on. Both of them immediately start serving food and drinks like waiters, and at this point, Frankenstein notices that Ronnie was at the party. In fact, it was probably Ronnie's party. Yes, friends, Frankenstein immediately removes his face cover and starts talking to Ronnie about how Ronnie has inspired him, and Frankenstein wants to give credit to Ronnie for even surviving his life. How during an event in 1917, Ronnie had smiled at Frankenstein, and Frankenstein still has the ticket from that day. In general, friends, Frankenstein was very happy to see Ronnie and was behaving just like a fan would. But Ronnie was feeling disgusted by Frankenstein's looks and smell. Ronnie clearly says that Frankenstein is not his type. Frankenstein is deeply hurt by this and suddenly starts doing Ronnie's dance. Ida joins him, and the next moment, many people at the party are perhaps possessed by Mary, and they also start dancing. Ronnie was in shock seeing this sight, and just then Jake and Myrna enter with some police. Jake gives a slightly strange expression upon seeing Ida, as if he knows her. Anyway, the police start attacking Frankenstein and chaos breaks out here. In the middle of all this, Ida picks up a pistol and points it at Ronnie, saying that if anyone hurts Frankenstein, she will finish Ronnie off. After this, Ida is again kind of possessed by Mary, where she starts exposing the people at the party, like how the men here were mistreating women even at the party. At one point, a police officer moves toward Ida, but Ida fires at him and he couldn't survive. This creates chaos here, and Frankenstein drops a chandelier and somehow saves Ida and gets her out of there. Outside on the street, they both kiss, where Ida had guilt in her mind because she had finished off a police officer, but Frankenstein consoles her. Then Jake arrives and tells them to stop, but by then these two manage to escape. In this scene, again from Jake's expressions, it seems as if he knows Ida in some way. Next, we are shown some scenes where Frankenstein and Ida get intimate, and then Frankenstein gets a tattoo of Ida's name on his chest. I mean, he didn't get Ida written, but rather Penelope, because that was the name Frankenstein had told her. Then they were watching Ronnie's movies, enjoying themselves, and moving from one place to another across the country by stealing cars. By now, Frankenstein and Ida had become very famous, and their photos had appeared on the front page of every newspaper. In fact, Ida and Frankenstein were committing even more crimes, like stealing and all. News of Ida's crimes had reached Dr. Cornelia and Greta as well. In fact, many women had started resonating with the monologue Ida gave at the party regarding the oppression of women. Because of this, a revolution of sorts had spread across the entire city, where women started dressing exactly like Ida, making marks on their faces and bodies just like her to reclaim their rights. Women were fighting for their rights and committing crimes on the streets, and this entire revolution was being called brain attack, as Ida had used this word during her monologue at the party. In the middle of all this, news about Ida reaches the mob boss Lupino, whom Clyde and James had told that they had finished off Ida and buried her. But Ida was on the front page of every newspaper, and so Lupino feels that Clyde and James lied to him. For this, he shoots and finishes off James right there, and while threatening Clyde, he gives him a task. What kind of task? Well, Clyde has to somehow finish off Ida because Ida knows a lot about Lupino's business. Now, who will tell Lupino that Ida had actually reached her end and then came back to life and that her memory is gone? Also, friends, here we see many human tongues detached and kept in jars behind Lupino, and this depicts how Lupino gets the tongues detached of those who speak against him and has kept a collection of them. If we talk about Jake and Myrna, they were following the trails of Frankenstein and Ida, tracking the reports of where they had been spotted. Jake was showing some sympathy toward Ida, and in fact he was even supporting the movement she had started. During their conversation, Myrna says that she knows where Frankenstein and Ida will go next. Actually, Myrna had noticed a pattern where Frankenstein was visiting places that were somehow related to Ronnie's movies, and if the patterns are analyzed, they went to Kansas City next, then many other cities, and that's why Myrna felt that they would finally head to Niagara Falls. So Myrna and Jake also set out for Niagara Falls. Myrna says that since she found more clues in this case, she should get the credit for solving it, but Jake mentions that this patriarchal world won't be able to accept that. On the other hand, Frankenstein and Ida were traveling in a stolen car, and here Frankenstein tells Ida a fake story about how he had proposed to her. Just then, a police car comes up behind them and they have to stop their vehicle. Frankenstein covers himself up, and Ida tells the police officer that he is her sick uncle. Now friends, this police officer was not a good person, as he starts taking advantage of the fact that Ida didn't have the car papers or a license. I mean, he touches her inappropriately and tries to mistreat her. Right then, Frankenstein finishes off this police officer with a gun, but by that time the officer's partner shoots Ida in the stomach. In response, Frankenstein also finishes off the police officer's partner. Mary's influence comes over Ida once again, and in anger she detaches the police officer's tongue with her teeth. Frankenstein calms her down, after which they both abandon the car and escape. From here, the scene moves to Niagara Falls, where the detectives have arrived, and Clyde has also arrived to hunt for Ida. Clyde had actually reached this place by tracking Myrna and Jake. Meanwhile, Frankenstein and Ida have also arrived here, where Frankenstein tends to Ida's wounds, but Ida was in a completely different mood. She was revolting because she didn't want a life like this, and then she suddenly fires gunshots into the air. Hearing the sound of gunshots, Jake comes to this spot and calls Ida by her real name. Ida also gets a feeling as if she knows Jake, and here for the first time, Ida feels that she isn't Ginger or Penelope, but someone else. Jake begins to say that he is the one responsible for Ida's condition and starts saying sorry, making the situation very strange. Just then, Myrna also arrives at this spot and fires a shot at Frankenstein, which hits him. In response, Ida shoots Jake in the leg and escapes with Frankenstein. But friends, by this point, Ida had realized that Frankenstein had lied to her about her being his bride and everything, and this caused a rift between Ida and Frankenstein. These two steal a car and escape from there, and at this point, Frankenstein finally tells Ida the truth. The truth about how Frankenstein was created, how he then needed a partner, and that's why Ida was dug up from the graveyard and brought back to life. On the other hand, we see an injured Jake, and he finally tells Myrna how exactly he knows Ida. Actually, Ida used to work for Jake, and she had infiltrated Lupino's gang on Jake's instructions. She would stay there, gather information on the mobs, and secretly tell Jake. At one point, Jake and his police team had enough evidence to take action against Lupino, but Lupino used his power, causing the case to basically be dropped. This made Ida very worried, and one night she came to Jake's office, where Jake and Ida became intimate. Jake had resolved to help Ida and handle Lupino, but before that, news arrived that Ida was no longer with us. But now Jake is very surprised because Ida is back, and that's why Jake has a lot of sympathy for Ida in his heart. At this point, Jake resigns from this case and makes Myrna the lead detective for it. Meanwhile, if we talk about Frankenstein and Ida, they drive to a drive-in theater where a Ronnie film was playing. There, they both sort out their differences, and Frankenstein was even ready to propose to Ida. Parallel to this, Myrna goes to a store where there was a report of Frankenstein being spotted, and here she asks a lady where the nearest theater is. The lady tells Myrna about the drive-in theater, and Myrna also reaches there. Meanwhile, following Myrna, Clyde also arrives at this place. So yes, a situation arises where Myrna is right behind Frankenstein and Ida's car, while Frankenstein is sort of proposing to Ida. Ida says that she is not Ginger, Penelope, Pretty Penny, or Ida. Rather, from now on, she will call herself the bride. She is the bride. She is not anyone's bride. She is not Frankenstein's bride. Rather, she is simply the bride, her own identity. All this is going on when suddenly Clyde shoots, and that shot hits Frankenstein right in the head. Yes, friends, in this situation, Ida, or should we say the bride, somehow puts Frankenstein in the car and escapes from there. At this point, a dangerous chase occurs, but the bride somehow manages to escape, and then she goes straight to Dr. Cornelia's laboratory. The bride tells Dr. Cornelia to bring Frankenstein back to life, but Dr. Cornelia flatly refuses. In this situation, the bride points a gun at her, and at this point, we viewers notice a few things. First of all, Dr. Cornelia's helper, Greta, was wearing the exact same makeup as the bride, meaning she also supports the bride's brain attack movement. By then, Clyde and Myrna had also entered the lab and were secretly listening to the conversation between the bride and Dr. Cornelia. Anyway, Dr. Cornelia reveals that she once had a husband named George and they loved each other very much. No one else touched their work, so they used to perform experiments on each other. They were working on topics like relativity, time dilation, and ripples in the curvature of space-time. It didn't work, but one day George passed away. In that situation, Dr. Cornelia brought her husband back to life, but friends, George's memory didn't return. He was a bit off and couldn't keep his mind stable, which is why Dr. Cornelia had to finish her own husband. Saying this, Dr. Cornelia says while crying that maybe the bride will also have to put down Frankenstein. Dr. Cornelia explains that they wanted to destroy what scientists call well-behaved geometry, the point where all known laws are valid. We wanted to see what a disobedient geometry looks like, how it appears, and when we saw it, it turned out it looks like you, meaning the bride. At this point, Clyde shoots the bride, and by now many police officers had also arrived and they shoot the bride. After being hit by several bullets, the bride falls over Frankenstein's body and couldn't survive. Myrna tries to stop everyone from shooting, but the police officers weren't listening to her, even though she was the senior. In fact, after the shooting, when Myrna says she is a detective, the officers make faces as if questioning how a woman could be a detective. Myrna tells all the police officers to leave the lab, and here we see Greta and Dr. Cornelia talking to each other. Then suddenly the scene shifts to Mary, who starts saying that there has never been a story as amazing as Frankenstein and his bride. After this, the scene outside the lab is shown where the police have caught Clyde, and friends, let me tell you that Clyde was hunting the bride so desperately because the mob boss Lupino was threatening the lives of his wife and children. Here we also see Myrna, who notices lightning striking the lab above. Inside the lab, it's shown that Frankenstein and the bride's fingers moved. This means, friends, that Dr. Cornelia has finally brought them both back to life through her experiment, and the film ends right there. Now, there is also a post-credit scene in the film where we see Jake, and around him were many girls wearing the same makeup as the bride. These girls were part of the protest started by the bride, and they had captured the mob boss Lupino. Yes, friends, Lupino was in their custody, and in the background we can see many detached tongues. They were all putting the bride's makeup on Lupino, and it depicts that they are going to finish him off. The post-credit scene ends here as well. So friends, this was the story of the film The Bride, and seeing the final scene, it is clear that Frankenstein and the bride are back to life. In fact, Jake has probably set out independently to hunt Lupino and was able to catch him with the help of the women in the revolt group. From a story point of view, there are no other theories here, but there are many hidden meanings in this film that we will talk about now. Keep in mind that I am telling you what the film intends to say, and I am not sharing any of my personal opinions here. So first, director Maggie Gyllenhaal herself explained in a press conference that when she watched the 1935 film Bride of Frankenstein, she realized that the bride only appears on screen for 2 minutes, says nothing, screams once, and then she is blown up. She was created for a man in a world where she was given no choice. Seeing this, Maggie was so deeply shocked that she thought this character should be given a voice. But in the film, this isn't just the bride's voice, it's Mary Shelley's voice too. And both are played by the same actress, Jessie Buckley. This casting decision is not a coincidence, it is a deliberate artistic statement. The real theory is that Mary Shelley couldn't say everything she wanted to say in her life, not in her actual life nor in her work. Now, as a possessor in the afterlife, she says through Ida everything she had once suppressed. This means this possession is not just a horror element, it is a metaphor for the suppressed female voice. Gyllenhaal suspects that Mary Shelley had much more to say that was not only unpublishable in 1820 but also unthinkable. So this possession is basically Mary's unfinished business that she is Another very subtle and beautiful detail is that the black marks on the bride's face in the production's visual conception are actually Mary Shelley's manuscript ink coming out. A woman who has been buried under the ground for 2 centuries and couldn't finish what she had to say. Mary's unfinished story is literally written on the bride's body. It is such a poetic visual idea that it stops you in your tracks. And friends, notice this too. Mary doesn't just possess the bride. In the party scene, she possesses several people at once, which starts the dance. This suggests that Mary's rage isn't limited to just one body. It's a collective force, an energy that spreads when people resonate with it. This scene symbolically shows that women's suppressed rage rage isn't an individual problem but a shared collective experience. Another interesting angle is that the crack Mary saw in her afterlife through which she could complete her story, that crack was actually Ida's moment of vulnerability when she was alone and suppressed among the mob. It means Mary possesses when a woman is most silenced and most controlled. This possession occurs when patriarchy grips its hand most tightly, and at that exact moment rage spreads. This is the core idea of the film. Now, don't just understand the brain attack movement in the film at a surface level. Superficially, it looks like women started rebelling because of The Bride, but there is a very layered commentary behind this movement. First, understand that Maggie Gyllenhaal said in an interview with Deadline, "You can't make a film about the Bride of Frankenstein and not put consent on the table. It's just not possible," because fundamentally she never agreed to any of this. We aren't born as grown women, and we aren't told that we were made to be married to someone else. It means the feminism in this film isn't just surface-level girl power, it's about the fundamental issue of consent and body autonomy. The bride was created without consent, brought back to life without consent, and given an identity without consent: Ginger, Penelope, Pretty Penny, and Frankenstein's bride. Every single identity was given by someone else, and that's why when she finally calls herself the bride, not anyone's bride, just the bride, it becomes a revolutionary act. In the brain attack movement shown in the film, women do their makeup just like the bride. They put black marks on their faces. These marks are Mary Shelley's ink, but for these women it becomes an act of reclaiming. It means something that happened to the bride's body by accident was something these women deliberately chose. This symbolically shows that when society tries to shame a woman's imperfection or abnormality and she embraces it, that imperfection becomes a weapon. Women put ink marks on their faces in solidarity with the bride, which society considered a mark of shame, but these people turned it into a symbol of resistance. And notice one more thing, friends. During the bride's struggle to escape, those women start a movement, commit crimes, and take to the streets. The film is saying that the system will never voluntarily give women freedom, which is why sometimes crimes have to be committed. The bride herself is a criminal in this film. The film's angle is that when women are marginalized and abused, they invariably unleash their monster side to demand justice. And friends, this isn't just about the 1930s, it's about today as well. A theory that critics and analysts have pointed out is that Myrna Malloy, Detective Jake's assistant, and the bride's movement are running in parallel. Throughout the film, Myrna is clearly the more intelligent and capable detective, but she is still just an assistant because society is patriarchal and believes that girls cannot be detectives. This shows that the bride's revolution isn't just on the streets, it's everywhere, even in so-called respectable institutions like law enforcement. And at the end of the film, Myrna becomes the lead detective. This means the bride's movement had a direct effect at the institutional level as well. This is a hopeful note from the film. Friends, now let's talk about what is actually the soul of the film. On the surface, it seems like a remake of the Frankenstein story, but it's actually a story asking what happens if suppressed rage finds a body. Throughout the film, the bride speaks in borrowed voices, first Mary Shelley's, then Melville's Bartleby with the famous line, "I would prefer not to," and then Mary Wollstonecraft's proto-feminist ideology, and she only finds her own voice when she names herself the bride. This is such an important detail. She had three identities: Ida, given by Mary, Penelope Rogers, given by Frank through a lie, and then the bride, which she chose herself. This film is essentially a story of identity formation. It's the story of a woman whom the world repeatedly gives a name, a box, or a role, and she finally refuses all of them and settles on a name that is uniquely her own. "I'd prefer not to." This line is the ultimate symbol of passive resistance, and it wasn't first said by her, it was said by Bartleby, who was a man. But Mary Shelley and the bride reclaim this phrase and turn it into the language of female defiance. A very interesting theory that is deeply encoded in the film is Dr. Cornelia's talk about disobedient geometry. Dr. Euphronia says that her experiment wanted to destroy well-behaved geometry, meaning that point in physics where all known laws are valid. She wanted to see what disobedient geometry looks like, and when she saw it, she realized it looks like the bride. This is a genius line. It means the rules of society, how a woman should be, how she should behave, how she should dress, whom she should accept. All of this is well-behaved geometry. The bride breaks all these rules, which is why she is disobedient geometry. And the film wants to say that this disobedience is beautiful, revolutionary, and necessary. Another layer that many people miss is the parallel between Frankenstein and Ronnie Reed. Frank, the Frankenstein monster, is a creature whom the world considers a monster. He is inspired by Ronnie Reed because Ronnie had polio in his childhood and doctors said he would never be able to walk, but he is now a beloved star. Frank sees himself in Ronnie, hoping that one day the world will accept him in a similar way. And when Ronnie meets Frank in person, he dismisses him and is disgusted by his looks and smell. This moment is devastatingly symbolic because Ronnie Reed himself was an outsider who has now become part of the system, and as soon as he became part of the system, he lost his empathy. This is a commentary on assimilation, that when marginalized people become accepted, they sometimes start rejecting those who are still on the outside. And finally, friends, Gyllenhaal told Entertainment Weekly that there is a person who had so much to say, who was silenced so much. What happens if you put your hand on a geyser? When it finally spreads, it will spread with triple the energy, and this is exactly what happens with this character. This geyser analogy is the summary of this entire film. Mary Shelley was a geyser, Ida was a geyser, the bride is a geyser, and the movement that started because of them, that is also a geyser. The film is saying that suppression is temporary, but rage is permanent, and when it finally comes out, the world changes. By the way, a subtle detail is that the character of Ronnie is played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who is Maggie Gyllenhaal's brother. There are many more such subtle details in the film, but if we start talking about every single frame, the video will become longer than the movie itself, so I would like to end the video right here. I hope you enjoyed my explanation. If you liked it, then please like and share the video, and also if you are new to the channel, then subscribe to us because we keep bringing such videos to our channel. Peace.